Hello and welcome. I'm Kathy Foley, and I'm in charge of the Zooming, putting this wonderful panel together. I want to thank everyone who's been in it. The way that we'll operate today is I will introduce our three presenters. They will each come on and talk for 12, 14 minutes. And then at the end, we will have a period for questions. As we go along, if you have any questions for each of the people as they come up, please put those in the chat, and we will go to that at the beginning when we get to the question and answer period. I want to welcome you here. This idea of using Zoom to reach out to our many people across the country or perhaps across the world was a way of bringing the many wonderful puppeteers that we have everywhere together, occasionally in the way that Puppetry International and the organization of UNIMA-USA does. Today, we're going to be looking around the world, and we are both going to be looking at a recent council meeting with the UNIMA Festival, and a little bit about a place that we will have an upcoming festival. So part of the idea is that we hope to see all of you in Korea in 2025, when you can see puppeteers from all over the planet gather together and meet in peace and love through puppetry. So for this panel, Worlds of Puppetry, we'll be looking at Benin, Korea, and Indonesia. The first paper will be by Heather Jean Denyer, who is an assistant professor at California State University, Fullerton. She teaches world theater, dramaturgy, and puppetry. She has contributed to Puppetry Journal, Puppetry International, and both volumes of Puppet and Spirit, a great book edited by Claudia Ornstein and Tim Cusack, just came out this year. Her chapter on African women puppet artists for women in puppetry has been translated already into Portuguese for a reprint, and one of her articles won the 2023 Nancy Staub Award, which we have now created for excellent writing, thinking, and research in puppetry. The second, her title will be a little revised from this, but about restitution and resurrection, the process of repatriation of African masks and objects from European museums. But the real title will come when she comes on the screen. The second presentation will be by Mina Kwan. She's a professor of world and comparative literature at the University of North Georgia. Her teaching and research areas include world literature, Asian American studies, performance studies, translation studies, gender studies. Her current scholarship focuses on the English translation of traditional Korean puppet plays and the contemporary representation of traditional Korean puppet theater. She also won a Nancy Staub Award this past year. The final paper will be by Karen Smith. Karen Smith is an outgoing president of UNIMA-USA. I think she finished about a month ago. For UNIMA-International, she's been a vice president, a president, the editor-in-chief of the online trilingual World Encyclopedia of Puppetry Arts. Her MA was from Flinders University. It was on modern Indian drama. Her puppetry work in India was with Sri Ram Center, Jan Madam, and Sara Puppet Theater. In Indonesia, she worked on Javanese wayang kulit at Sanggar Redi Waluyo. And of course, Mina will be giving us her paper, which has to do with Korean puppetry to prepare us for 2025. And Karen will talk a little bit about some of the activities that took place at the recent UNIMA Council meeting in Bali. So I'm going to pass it over now to Heather, who then will pass it directly to Mina and then on to Karen. Remember, put your questions in the chat and we will come to them at the end when we all come back on screen. Thank you so much for being here. If you aren't a member of UNIMA-USA, join us. We love puppetry, and so do you. Also, look carefully. I think there might be a special deal that you can save $5. Just go to the UNIMA-USA website and register. Heather, all yours.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction, Kathy. It's an honor to be here today. I also want to give thanks to Dacia Posner, who edited the article that won the Nancy Staub Award for Puppetry International, and to Claudia Ornstein and Tim Pusek, who are currently editing, almost finished, the extended chapter for Puppet and Spirit. So the original article was entitled "A Homecoming Story for African Objects," and it was published in 2021 in Puppetry International, volume 49. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my story of this research and how it's continued since, how it started and how it's continued. So I'm going to share, there we go. So I'm going to talk about repatriation, restitution, and resurrection. And I'm thinking about the question of the return of African objects from European museums and other questions that come up in that. I'm looking specifically at two cases in the original article. I was looking at the Beninese bronzes in the British Museum and the 26 Royal Dahomean treasures from the present-day country of Benin, and that's going to be the focus largely. So where are we in the world? My research is based in West Africa, particularly in places where French is major language spoken. And so I've had the pleasure of spending a lot of time doing research in Benin, which is right next to Nigeria, as well as in neighboring Togo, in Cote d'Ivoire, and in Burkina Faso. I'm going to touch a little bit on Burkina Faso as well. My scholarship focuses on women as well as on puppetry and theater. And I'm going to discuss the objects from these countries and how my research into this area got started. It started in Burkina Faso in 2017 when the French president, Emmanuel Macron, stated at a conference in Ouagadougou, "I cannot accept that a large share of several African countries' cultural heritage be kept in France. There are historical explanations for it, but there is no valid, lasting, and unconditional justification. African heritage cannot solely exist in private collections and European museums. African heritage must be showcased in Paris, but also in Dakar, Lagos, and Cotonou. This will be one of my top priorities." So in 2017, he sort of planted a seed. And since then, first he started he started a study about the repatriation project and the questions of repatriation from the French museums. This necessitated changing a French law, which stated that the law was originally that all objects in French museums were owned by the French citizens. So they had to effectively change the law to repatriate some objects. So far, there have only been 27 objects returned, the 26 I'm going to discuss to Benin, and one sword returned to Senegal. But in other countries, including the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and even the Smithsonian here in the United States, the process has begun of repatriating objects. Still, 26 objects, 27 objects, if you will, from France is very little. At the museum I'm looking at, there are 90,000 objects from Africa there alone, and there are hundreds of thousands of African objects in Europe today. So thinking about how these objects exist, we have to, in these museums, we have to acknowledge how they got there in the first place. Most of them were taken during colonization, or they fell into the hands of art dealers and were bought at auction. So oftentimes, even in museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, the journey of these objects from their original place of creation and belonging, their home, to the present day museums where they live right now are really gray and murky. And the Met Museum has actually been called out for not really doing due diligence, because a lot of objects were taken under false pretenses, or of course during colonization quite violently as well. When they're put in the museums in Europe, they are treated either as art objects or as artifacts. But this is counter to their actual way of existing in their original cultures. So Smithsonian curator Mary Jo Arnoldi says, art has always been perceived as being functional within most African societies, and this sense of function is embedded in the aesthetics. These objects are central to the production of knowledge. And in some of the objects we'll look at, not only do some of them tell history, but some of them are actually used to communicate with spirits, including the ancestors of kings. They're used to communicate with some of the voodoo deities, and they are believed to have souls and spirits themselves. So they are not understood as art objects outside of Europe, and they are not understood as artifacts. They're very much understood as living identities. And I should also acknowledge that in France, they're usually considered as primitive arts in the context of the African objects. So in the chapter, I discussed the Benin bronzes, which are ironically neither from Benin nor made of bronze. So these are actually taken by British soldiers from what is now Nigeria, and the Edo state in the southwest of Nigeria. They exist in the British Museum to this day. And when I was there, I actually went to visit them last July. I had to go into the basement to find them. And during the 40 minutes when I was down admiring them, there were maybe 3 other people who came down. So many of the Benin bronzes are not even displayed. A lot of them remain in storage, and even the ones on display are not really being viewed by that many people. And yet, the former director, Hartwig Fischer, said a universal museum whose beneficiaries and in the end whose owners are the citizens of the world. He believes that the museum should keep the objects so that everybody from around the world has access to them. But the irony is, of course, that the people from Nigeria are the people who do not have access to them. I do want to make note that Hartwig Fischer resigned in August because it came to be understood that somebody who was working at the museum was actually stealing objects that were in storage and selling them online. So there is a new museum director, at least temporary, from the Victoria and Albert Museum. But I'm going to focus on the royal objects from Dahomey. So the 26 objects that were returned to Benin in 2021 came from the Musée des Quai Branly in Paris, as you can see with the Eiffel Tower in the background. The current president or director of the museum said, Emmanuel Cazot-Héroux, said, "I am not in favor of objects being sent out into the world and left to rot." So there have only been 26 objects repatriated so far, and they hold on to many of these objects in the museum to this day. In 2022, I returned to Benin, where I had I wanted to go and see the objects that had just been returned, but I also had the great pleasure of meeting 2 experts from Dahomey, who took me on a guided tour of where King Béhanzan's palaces were. So how did the objects get to come into French ownership, if you will, in the first place? In 1894, the French invaded and finally conquered. They'd been trying to conquer for a while, but they hadn't succeeded. They finally conquered the warriors who are called the Agoudiers, the female warriors who protected the kingdom of Dahomey. And the reason why they wanted to defeat this kingdom is because King Béhanzan, who you can see his emblem is of a shark, he was known as the Shark King. He controlled a major port, and the French wanted access to that port in order to get more resources and take control of areas where the resources were in West Africa. So Béhanzan and the Dahomeyan warriors were able to resist until 1894. At the time when the French were going to win, Beonzen actually set fire to his palaces so that the objects in there would not be taken. Yet some of them were. The objects include 4 of the palace doors, and you can see in them, these doors tell history. They have messages and meaning with the animals chosen in the carving process and the other objects. There are guns in there, as well as recad, a staff that I'll talk about in a minute. On the left, on the bottom of that door, on the far left, you can see that there's a circular object that's actually a snake eating its own tail, which is a symbol of the continuity of life. So you can see that these objects have great meaning, even if they may not be understood by someone outside of the original context who may not be able to read them. The azans, there were 6 azans among the objects repatriated. These are sculpted from metal, and metal is connected to the voodoo god Gu. And so there's believed to be a strong spiritual connection, not only for those who are crafting the objects, but in their usage. They're used during ceremonies to announce when ceremonies are going to take place, and they have libations poured over them during ceremonies. And you can see particularly with the ones on the extreme sides, that the carving of animals and of particular objects is very symbolic. It has meaning and tells stories in it. There were 4 thrones, including the 2 on the either side, and the very intricately carved one on the top. The one on the bottom left is called actually a diakite. It was a portable stool for the king, so a sort of makeshift throne when he was not at his palace. And there's also a carved calabash, decorated calabash, which was used to hold water that would be used in ceremonial practice in the king's palace. There were 2 textile making tools, a spindle and a weaving tool on the left, and then the top center. Below that is a leather pouch or satchel that was carried by a soldier from the Blue Bataillon Bleu, which would be a group of soldiers who were not originally from Dahomey. And on the right is the tunic and the bottom from an Egogie uniform. When I visited these objects in the royal treasures in Cotonou, Benin, the only objects that you were not allowed to photograph, and indeed they were protected by a curtain, were the top and bottom of the Egogie uniform. So the objects that I focus on in my chapter for Puppet and Spirit are 2 kinds. Les recades, these are staffs, and as you can see, they are carved wood with metal inlays, and they almost resemble animals, and that's intentional. It's like the metal inlay in one place is an eye, and on the one on the left, it's like a bird with a feather on the top and a curved beak. The one on the right is more like a horse with a mane in the back. And they are believed to be connected to the natural world, the animals as well. These were made for the kings, and the king would carry them when they traveled. And when they were not able to meet with someone, they would send the recad in their place. So these were actually emissaries of the king. They literally were stand-ins for the king himself. The recads are also used in ceremonial dance, pounded into the ground. Their story is really interesting. They were first developed when there was a group of Dahomeans who were in a field who were attacked, and they had to defend themselves using the only weapons they had, the hoe. But they came to be a really important emblem for the kings themselves. And finally, the statues. From left to right, the statue of the Lion King, Glele, the statue of King Guezo, who is, the statue is part bird, part man, and it's metal that makes the feathers, and King Beonzen, again, the Shark King. And you can see that each of them is in a particular stance with their arm raised as a symbol of their power. There are also metal inlays in these wooden statues, because again, that's a connection to the spirit world. It's a way of, it's almost like an antenna to the spirit world, and it connects to the god, voodoo god Gu. Now, when they were repatriated to Benin, there were ceremonies to receive them. They were the same ceremonies that would be used to welcome a king back home. And as you can see, these objects still have tremendous meaning for the people there. This is them in the Presidential Palace exhibition where I went to see them. They are in glass cases. The Egogie uniform is separately covered, but people come and pay homage to them because their return is a return of history, but it's also a return of these objects which are used to connect to the spiritual world, connecting the living with those who have passed, the ancestors.
About 2 minutes.
Thank you. So the questions that I probe in looking into this, in looking into these objects and their repatriation, is about the question of resurrection. For people in Benin today, they, as their ancestors, believed that these objects had souls, that they were not only used to connect with the spirits and not only representing the kings, but that they actually were as living objects themselves. So instead of treating them as objects, as dead things, I use the concepts developed in puppetry, where we really consider this gray area between being alive and being dead, to probe how we can consider these objects as the subjects of their own stories. So my question is, what has happened to their souls? Many people say that the moment that the objects were taken by force by white Europeans and taken out of their homeland, that they were killed. Some believe that they have simply been sleeping. I liken them in one way to being in a coma state, because they are still living and yet they are not fully themselves. But there is a possibility that they may reawaken. So when they have been brought back after going through these ceremonies, has their soul been resurrected? Have they been reawakened? And I don't know the answers to these questions. I don't think anybody does. I did enjoy probing these questions with people I met in Benin. But I think that the larger ramifications of all of the questions of repatriation of objects from museums has to somehow start with understanding the objects themselves, not in a European sense, not as museum objects or primitive art objects or artifacts of dead cultures, but rather as living beings who can write their own stories and whose history has yet to be completed. Thank you so much. Here's my email. If you would like to email me to discuss this further, I'm happy to talk about this topic at length. But thank you so much for having me today. So I think Mina is up now.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Hello, everybody. I'm Mina Kyung-Hae Kwon, and thank you so much for inviting me for this wonderful presentation opportunity. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, UNIMA. I presented a version of this presentation at the Puppeteers of America Symposium this past summer, and I'll be elaborating on the similar content today. And my main goal in this short presentation is to increase people's interest in the 2025 UNIMA Festival in South Korea. And in the second half of my presentation, I'll be introducing the traditional forms of Korean puppetry informed by my research. Although South Korea now offers various modern forms of poetry inspired by diverse global cultures. So on this title slide, you will see first the outdoor performance of traditional Korean puppet theater, and you can see the stage setting here and the musicians here. So this was performed by Ansong Namsadang Group. And this is Chuncheon, and I'm going to actually tell you more about this festival location. So let me actually. Okay, so Chuncheon City is the venue for the 2025 festival, and the decision was made in 2021, and I was able to find a really nice promotional video. So I plan on showing you a clip of that. And according to that video and according to the website, UNIMA Korea aims to contribute to the globalization of puppet shows and promote international exchanges through this opportunity. So I'm going to go to the promotional video, and I'll be skipping some parts and fast forward so that I can deliver the most content to you in this short presentation.
We are
Oh, let me make sure that I clicked sound. Excuse me. So I need to share sound. Okay, so let me start.
We're pleased to introduce Chuncheon, a candidate city for 2025 UNIMA Congress. We would like to guide you through the city, starting with Soyanggang, a river that flows across the city. Puppetry and culture that goes along with it. We strongly believe that this beautiful city would be a great place to hold the next 2025 UNIMA Congress. The biggest puppet festival of Korea was founded right here in Chuncheon, celebrating its 33-year anniversary this year. It is the only city in Korea with puppetry theater and museum representing its significance in Korean puppetry culture. Chuncheon, otherwise known as the cultural capital city of Korea, holds various festivals such as Mime Festival, Art Festival, music festivals, and concerts. Despite challenging circumstances due to the prolonged COVID-19 last year, Chuncheon managed to successfully start the first municipal puppetry theater company in the country, as well as showcasing its opening performance, White Mountain. Based on its rich cultural resources and constant endeavors, Chuncheon was named as Korean Culture City by the Korean government this year. Accordingly, Chuncheon will receive a government fund of $18 million for puppetry. Chuncheon and Korean puppeteers have been thoroughly preparing for this school for 5 years. Chuncheon has invested $450,000 in this pilot project, which allowed invitations for 15 foreign puppetry lecturers, 10 puppetry educational center officials, and approximately 300 Korean puppeteers and amateurs. This school aims to be an international institution with a 3-year curriculum, developing international collaborations between puppeteers all around the world, not just limited to the Korean puppeteers. UNIMA Korea is located here in Chuncheon, a major city of Korean puppetry arts, as well as being the host for 2022 AVIAMA Congress. While the whole world was suffering from the first 2025 UNIMA Congress will be the best congress and festival at the lowest cost in every aspect, including but not limited for transportation, accommodation, meals, office facilities, and sightseeing required for the attendance of the Congress. We will carry forward our scheme with close partnership with Gangwon Tourism Foundation so that more UNIMA members can visit the 2025 UNIMA Congress. Secondly, we will take full advantage of the proximity and convenient transportation conditions between regions in Korea. With one visit, you will be able to experience the culture of the 3 representative cities of Korea, have more performance opportunities, and meet a diverse audience. The Congress and Festival will take place mainly in Chuncheon, along with in Seoul, the capital city of Korea, and in Gwangju. The local expenses to visit the 3 cities will be covered. We will link the 3 cities to organize a larger festival. It'll not only be the Festival of Chuncheon, and you'll be able to participate in the Puppetry Festival of the 3 cities. To execute this plan successfully, Chuncheon have formed a partnership with the Seoul Street Art Creation Center operated by the Seoul Foundation for Arts and Culture and the National Asia Culture Center in Gwangju.
Okay, so I will stop here, but I hope I was able to give you some sense of Chuncheon and the other cities for this festival. So let me move to the next slide. So when I heard this news, I was particularly excited about it because I actually grew up in Chuncheon. Chuncheon is my hometown, and I remember as a student going to the annual puppet festival, observing many performances and puppeteers. So it was really wonderful to hear about this news, and I hope many of you will consider joining and participating in this festival opportunity. And now I'm going to briefly talk about traditional Korean puppet theater. According to the influential Korean scholar Shim Woo-sung, there are 3 main types of traditional Korean puppet theater. The first type is called Kokdugakshi Norum, which is a rod puppet play. It's the representative Korean puppetry. It's a satirical play against upper class and posers, mainly the Joseon, Confucian upper class and posers. And the second type is called Baltal, which is a foot mask puppet play. It's a one-of-a-kind satirical play. And you can see some of the image here. The puppet is controlled by the puppeteer's feet. And also the third type is called Mansokjungnori, shadow puppet play, which is a religious play about Buddhist enlightenment. And that is the only extant traditional Korean shadow puppet play. And the first 2 are recognized by National Intangible Cultural Heritage, and I am currently working on translating these scripts from the 3 main types into English so that more people can have access to this tradition. And so a little bit more about the first type. The first type is the most representative puppet theater, and it was handed down orally. And it was performed by itinerant folk performance troops. To give you a sense of this traditional puppet, Korean puppet theater, I'm going to play my reading of my English translation from the scene from the first scene. So I'm going to begin from about 3 minutes. That's where English begins. So let me go to that. 3. Okay, so.
Traveling around the mountains and rivers? Which ones have you been to? So you want me to tell you which different places I have been to? That's right. Ha! This person really wants to know all the details. Sure, I might as well hear all about it. All right then, I'm going to tell you about all the wonderful places I have been to, so listen well. Out of the South Gate, here I go. Passing by 칠패 Market, 팔패 Market, 정패 Market, 배다리, 여우제고개, 신방뜰, 남태령, and after that, how much further should I go? In straw shoes with a bamboo cane, let's go see the mountains and rivers. In Jeolla province, Mount Jiri and the Seomjin River in Hadong. In Gyeongsang province, Mount Taebaek and the Nakdong River in Sangju. In Gangwon province, Mount Kumgang and its 12,000 peaks. In Hamgyong province, Mount Baekdu and the river of Tuman. In Pyongan province, Mount Myohyang and the river of Cheongcheon. In Hwanghae province, Mount Guwon and the scenic Buddhist temples. In Chungcheong province, Mount Gaeryong and the Kum River in Gongju. In Gyeonggi province, Mount Samgak and the Imjin River in Paju. For all this sightseeing, I have no idea how many days it takes.
Hey, old man, I asked you to tell me where you have traveled. I didn't ask you to sing a song.
Oh, you're right. I'm losing my mind. An old man must be close to death.
Okay, so that was the end of the sample reading, and let me go to the next slide. So in my other research, I also wrote an article talking about the contemporary representation of traditional Korean puppet play. So in one article, I compared two theater groups. One was by director Kim Hak-soo, and it was by the theater group Saninoma, and the title was Bakcheomji Returns. It was performed in 2014 and 2016. And the other play was by Dae-jin, and his group Umma Gang Gang has this show called Kokdu Around the World in 80 Days. So you can see some of the performance pictures here. And this is the first group. It uses the traditional puppets made by the intangible cultural heritage holder, the same type of puppet, but it adds a layer of contemporary satire, criticizing the government corruption and the contemporary politicians, and especially referring to the Sewol ferry disaster incident, where the ferry going to Jeju Island capsized and about 300 people drowned, and most of them were high school students, and it became a political issue, making people realize about the lack of safety measures and also the government's response. And it was a really big political issue, and this theater group refers to that incident. And the traditional puppet Hong Dong-ji urinates and breaks wind on the stage out of rebellion against the upper class. And even in this performance, he does that. But you can see the yellow ribbon, again, referring to the Sewol ferry disaster incident. So here in this performance, the criticism was more about contemporary South Korean culture and issues. And you can see the monks, again, the criticism was toward contemporary politicians. And this is the second group, and you can see the puppets are different. So in this group, the puppets are reimagined, the full body puppets and some miniature puppets, so they are different, but it's inspired by traditional Korean puppet theater. And
Nina,
yes?
if you can wrap it up in a minute or so. Thank you.
Okay, so you can see these different ways to deliver the satire and modernize the satire. And here you can kind of see kind of the ending part where we get to see suicidal people begin to rethink and think about persevering in the South Korean culture that has a lot of problems with employment issues and suicide and depression. And in other research, I also talk about traditional Korean puppet theater and its connection or similarities and differences with Punch and Judy, which are fascinating, and I plan on continuing to explore those points. And I noticed that Punch character can be actually seen in at least 3 different puppets in this tradition. And there are more details here. And you can see these behind the scene pictures. And so in this small short presentation, I hope I was able to increase your interest in the upcoming festival and also give you a sense of traditional Korean puppetry. Thank you for listening. And now we'll turn to Karen Smith's presentation.
Thank you, Mina. Can you see me? Oh gosh, yeah, now I can see myself. Anyway, thank you, Mina. That was very, very interesting. And we're going to learn a lot more about Korean puppetry and culture when we all go to Chuncheon and Seoul and the other third city in May, I believe it's May 2025. I'm going to now go back to this year's UNIMA, a big UNIMA event, which was the 2023 UNIMA Council, and UNIMA-International was the host, and they put on a festival and a seminar, international seminar. But my topic is Wayang workshopping in Bali. And first of all, I'll just give you a background on this 6-day workshop. And this was due to Kathy Foley, who came up with this wonderful idea to augment UNIMA participants' exposure to Indonesian Wayang by organizing a Wayang workshop that would take place after the UNIMA Council and Festival, which was held in Bali in April, end of April 2023. So many thanks to Kathy Foley and your University of UC Santa Cruz for financial support, to UNIMA-International, to UNIMA-USA, who endorsed the idea, to Bali Module, a local a theatre company, and all the workshop instructors. So you will see here, first of all, I'm going to, you will see here, this is what one of the performances that took place during the council, UNIMA Council as part of the festival. This is a scene from a Balinese Wayang performance by Dalang Iwayan Nadayana, also known as Cheng Blong, probably one of the four most popular, or one of the very popular Dalang in Bali. Now, the 2023, as I said, there was a council, festival, and seminar. So if I could have slide 2, please. Sara, slide 2, you will see here, this on the left, there's a Balinese performance that, and on the right, a Central Javanese Wayang Purwa performance. They were performed at the festival. Slide 3. Now, this is an example of inovasi, Wayang inovasi, or contemporary innovative Wayang. And you will see in the center photo, Ari Sidiastini, who's the daughter of Imade Sidia, another very well-known Dalang. She created for her master's project a spectacular performance that focused on the birth of Wayang Kulit and the stages of its creation. And this combined human and puppet shadows, dance, and musical elements. So there is a young woman creator. Now, slide 4. This is Balinese Dalang Imade Sidia, who we just saw in the previous slide. And his village troupe in Bona, the village of Bona, this is the troupe of Ketchak, or monkey dance chorus, and performing with a giant-sized puppet of Kumbhakarna, who's the brother of Ravana from the Ramayana. And this was a special Ketchak and performed on a beach during the UNIMA Council's closing ceremony. It was very dramatic. Slide 5. And during the council, there was an international seminar. You'll see Imade Sidia in the center, one of the speakers, and our 3 American presenters, Kathy Foley, Matthew Cohen, Claudia Orenstein, and the moderator on the left, and Cariad Aslis, who did a kind of, gave a summary at the end. Now, the Wayang workshop itself was led by Inyoman Sadana, who is a professor of Wayang at the Institute Seni Indonesia, the Indonesian Institute of the Arts, and his son, Imade Georgiana Triwinadi, known as Georgian, named after the state in the US, and he's a recent ISI graduate. Now, American Dalang, thank goodness, Kathy Foley ensured there was a focus on the basics with repetitions and simplifications of dance sequences and dialogue. given the limited time and the great complexity of the art, within 6 days, we tried to cover a lot of ground. And so the mostly American participants, some of you are here today, including myself, were joined by puppeteers from France, Iran, South Korea, and Argentina. And participants were introduced to the interlocked aesthetics and essences of Balinese arts, dance, topeng mask theatre, music, painting, sculpture, and of course, wayang. So the workshop culminated in a performance based upon a story from the Mahabharata. So the 6-day workshop, it was a mix of wayang practice and field trips. And the field trips included visits to noted dalangs at their home studios. So slide 6, please. And also performance of Balinese classical dance, topeng, mask, kecak, trance dance in temple context. This was one of our visits to the village of Sukawati. And here we met the woman dalang, Ni Sendi. And she is in the center there on the photo on the left, and she won Best Female Dalang in a recent all-women competition and of dalang. And on either side, there are the 2 female Gende Wayang musicians. These are the 2 instruments that you accompany a traditional Wayang performance. On the right, you will see non-Nigerian master Dalang Imade Sidya. He's the father of Imade Sidya, who we've seen before. He has several sons, and also his grandson, you'll see in the back, are also studying Wayang Kulit. Slide 7. These are all of the workshop participants, all dressed up in traditional Balinese clothes with the woman dalang and musicians. Slide 8, at one of the visits at the temples, you will see Ikatut Kodi, he dances on the left, Topeng Tua. This is a Balinese mask dance representing an old man who jokes and interacts with the audience. Ikutukodi also, upper right slide, Topeng Sitakaria. This is a very special sacred mask representing an old man with buck teeth. And this mask is required to complete a ritual Balinese Hindu ceremony. On the bottom on the right, another Topeng dancer with the temple priest, and they are making holy water to bless the ceremony. Slide 9, this is another temple ceremony in the village of Bona, and we were invited to see Kecak. You could see in the background the Balinese monkey dance, which was performed as a sequence of the Ramayana. You will see Rama and Sita and the monkey hero Hanuman. Slide 10, also at the Bona temple, these were 2 trance dances that were performed. Sanghang Jaran on the left is performed by 2 male dancers in a trance who ride symbolic, if you could see that, symbolic horses, and they run through the fire. On the right, this is Sangyang Dadari, and it is performed by 2 prepubescent females who danced in delicate unison in a state of trance. Here they are being restored after their performance. Now the seminar at Denpasar that was held during the Wayang workshop, and it was an opportunity for ISI staff and Balinese PhD students to present their papers to an international as well as local audience. And several of those papers will appear in Puppetry International Research, UNIMA-USA second journal, which will debut online in December. So that's something wonderful to look forward to. Some of the international workshop participants also presented at the seminar. Now, the Wayang workshop itself, the basic training focused on 4 Wayang character types. And we learned to dance, can you believe it? Each character type, learning how each character essentially moves. We attempted to approximate the character's movements through our own body, our face, and our empathetic understanding of each individual character's personality. That was the goal. Then we tried to animate the characters on the screen. We learned the characters' individual voices, and we learned the chanted accompaniment for each of the 4 character types. Those 4 character types: 1, refined and heroic male characters; 2, refined female characters; 3, rough, crude, and demonic characters; 4, special characters such as Hanuman, Garuda, Jatayu, they are 2 noble birds, or the more ferocious Nagas, the snakes or dragon-like mythical beings. So the workshop began with the typical dance movements associated with each of these 4 character types. For instance, refined male and female characters would move with an elegant swaying motion, the epitome of heroic manhood or lovely womanhood. Slide 11. So the workshoppers follow Paksadana. Here's Paksadana and Kathy, and we're all behind. And we are dancing the moves of a refined male character. And Paksadana and his son Georgian, they demonstrated the specific manner in which a Wayang character moves, thinks, speaks, behaves, how each character type fights. There are a lot of battles in Wayang, and also woos. There are love scenes in Wayang too. So we had a lot of fun learning the movements of 2 lovers, the coy female, the eager wooing male. We worked on group movements or interactions, breaking into pairs of the right hand, the aloof protagonist, and left hand, which was usually the kasar or antagonist figures. First by doing one puppet's moves physically, then seeing how these moves are duplicated with 2 Wayang puppets held in hand and moved by one animator. We did this without the screen. As part of these lessons, we were introduced to hand-to-hand combat. We tried out the fighting moves ourselves as choreographed dancers, firstly singly, then paired with a partner. This embodied approach.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, let's go to slide 12. I'm going to briefly hear 5 of the workshoppers with Ikatut Sodiana, with some of the puppets that he and his father made. I won't talk about how Georgian demonstrated how to animate the regular sized puppets on the screen. Then we were introduced to the typical voices. As you know, each character has a specific voice, and these voices, as well as the images, are recognized by Balinese audiences. And we worked on the vocal elements. This was interesting. These were the songs that we used in our performances, including the Demon Army's marching chants, Chak Chak Boom, Chak Chak Seed, and Dipong Ditsir, and Tutuga, Tutuga, Tuga. And then the female characters, our beautiful heavenly damsels, Syria, Aria, Luria, Syria, Aria. We all had to learn these vocal chants or songs. Now the performance, if you go to 13, we had a story based on the Mahabharata, the wedding, Arjuna's wedding. We also used very large puppets that Georgian and his group created. This is one of the heavenly damsels. So these were quite heavy. We had also the Demon King Niwatakawacha and his demon army, also giant size, as well as 5 giant size tree of live Kayanan puppets that we had to learn to animate. Slide 4, you also part of our little performance was Matthew Cohen performed the scene with regular sized puppets on a screen. We were all in front. Slide 15. Here are the 7 heavenly damsels, 2 of them regular sized. And slide 16, you will see we had representing the positive versus the demonic. We had the giant-sized barong figure, which was animated by three of us, and 2 animated the rangda, the witch-like character. Now, the performance was 40 minutes long, and this was on the last evening, and we incorporated musical accompaniment with improvised percussion instruments, including our mouth music. I gave you a little example, and that we created, and it drew local children, their parents, several dignitaries, a dog, which joined us on stage. And in the end, we were absolutely thrilled with our funky, energetic, decidedly rough around the edges show. And slide 17, here we are all again. And you will see 2 children, Min and Matthew's 2 children also performed. They were masked monkeys. And you could see how happy we were. Slide 18, this is just to thank everybody again who made this happen. And let's all think about Korea and a possibility of holding a workshop there, either before or possibly after the 2025 Chuncheon Congress. So I think that's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen. I want to call Mina and Heather back on screen. We have like 2 minutes left out of our hour things booked. So we will go a little bit beyond. I'll be taking the questions. Some of you put comments or other things in the chat. Others seem to have used the Q&A function. The first question was more information about what's going on in Korea in 2025. If you look at the website for UNIMA-International, you'll see more as more comes out. If you are a member of UNIMA-USA, you will be getting announcements from us when we have more information about how exactly to sign up. We are hoping that some of you are applying to perform there because we want to come and cheer you on at that particular time. I want to thank you all for your wonderful questions. We're going to go right to some of the comments. We have a comment that some of the information from Korea has changed from, that was their initial information that they presented to the council and things like that. More details. One of our UNIMA-USA members, Min, who's married to Matthew Cohen, is working as a consultant on it. So we're very lucky and hope she will keep us up to date as the news changes for 2025. Everyone is asking for your emails. I think this was particularly for Heather, that if you are willing to have questions, and many of you can also, if you're a member of UNIMA-USA, look in the directory. These people are members or things like that. So if you have additional questions, do that. And if you are willing to share them, each of you, that may get us more questions. We had a question, this was for Mina, foot puppets. What are foot puppets and how can they find out more about them? So Mina, do you want to just take a minute more on that?
Well, foot puppet, that part, I'm going to be on a Fulbright grant this coming year. And that's one of the areas that I'm going to explore. I plan on hopefully interviewing the heritage holder. So I wish I could tell you more, but that's the area that I'm going to learn more about.
Okay, we have Carol Sterling sends greetings from New York City and is looking forward to seeing everyone in South Korea. We have a number of people saying your presentations are so exciting. Heather, puppets. and or masks. You told us about animated objects or things like that. But I was just wondering if any of these African things, are they returning masks, or are those village? And, it seemed like they were talking about the very high court things that the major battle may be going on of.
Well, the reason why the 26 royal objects were returned was because they were requested specifically by the president of Benin, Patrice Talon. They had been earlier on requested by a descendant of King Beelzebub. And so the report that was written by Sara and Bénédicte Savoy, Sara is a theorist from Senegal, and Bénédicte Savoy is an art historian in France. And they wrote this report that says, under no uncertain circumstances, anytime an object is requested to be repatriated, it should be from France. So basically, they're now saying, well, we'll only return things when people request them to be repatriated. So in terms of other objects like masks and everything, it will just depend on a case-by-case basis. In the future, I will say that there is a rich puppetry, there are a number of rich puppetry traditions in West Africa and elsewhere in Africa. For Puppet and Spirit Volume 1, I had the great pleasure of interviewing Sogobo artist Yaya Koulibaly from Mali. So if you're interested in full body animal puppets from Mali, that interview just came out in Puppet and Spirit Volume 1. And I wrote about a festival in Benin called Tenitaji in another version of Puppetry International. So there's some stuff out there. There's, of course, and I wrote about the women puppetry artists in Women in Puppetry, 3 of them from West Africa. So anyway, there's a lot out there. There's a lot more to be discovered. And I'm going to keep on top of the discussions of repatriation for sure.
So Karen, you were talking about learning dance and more about character type. Is it puppetry that you were doing in that workshop, or was it?
Well, you can't. Yeah. Well, you can't. You can't animate the puppets if you don't know how they are, how they move. And I think that was the way Pasadena taught, and actually was a very effective way, because usually you just take the puppet and you put it on the screen and you learn kind of the movements, but you don't have any kind of physical understanding and emotional understanding even of that puppet's being. So, I mean, you were there. Kathy, could you say anything more about that?
I just make my students puppets all the time. I say, forget who you are. Forget all that.
I think it was great.
This is how you move. This is your voice. Things like that. It's not, it's you, but it's an expanded you that has nothing to do with the gender or shape or energy you use in your everyday. So that's why character type is the thing. It's a solo tradition, really, of mask and puppet. And therefore, you have to learn how to play one body quite differently. And that's why you start with the types and those differences first. Nancy Staub put in that go look on YouTube for Korean foot puppets and you will find them. So Nancy, oh, and Mina also put her email in and she'll direct you toward them. They're wonderful, and who is it? Inez, and we have seen some foot puppets, and there's a South American artist who does some wonderful foot puppet things, perhaps inspired by the Korean things, but you can use all parts of your body as puppets. That's why it's so interesting to look around the world and see all the possibilities that your culture didn't think of different ways of entering the world of puppetry. So we have thanks, that's great. Starting from the movement, Bonnie Perrielli is saying, starting from the movement allows me to understand a character much more than words might. yeah, confirming that this is not just one culture's way or path. And, I think for each of these traditions that you're talking about, certainly in Africa and Korea, the movement from the puppet to the mask and then back to the human. The human is the smaller, usually, and the less interesting manifestation of that same energy, because many of these traditions are outdoors, have to reach across far spaces, don't have the kind of here, it's us small people in this black box, and only the person who's important will be lit, or things like that. They take much more space, much more musical sound, much more energy to reach across the universe and around the world. So Nancy is now telling us about Japanese versions of leg puppets or things. We're coming up to the end of our time. Is there one last question that I've missed and everyone can yell at me about? Otherwise, I'll just say this is Mindy Donner. This was a rich taste of the presenter's research. Thank you. And I just want to echo her and to advise each of you out there, read the stuff that these people are producing. I know nothing about what's going on in these areas of Africa, but each time I dip into Heather's thing, each time I pay attention to where Karen Smith has been most recently, whenever I reach out to Mina to ask about Korea, I learned so much about puppetry, but also about those parts of the world, what's going on there, and how each of these traditions is working not with some ancient past, but about very present religious, social, political, ideological problems, and all of these things about history, histories of colonialism and justice that are about how we treat ourselves in the world right now. Although we're talking about puppetry, we're talking about how we can use puppetry, which UNIMA-USA and UNIMA-International do to create a more peaceful, understanding, and beautiful world. So thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you to all of you who listened. And I hope that all of you out there who are listening, that in a future Zoom, you will be the presenters because you have the knowledge that we all want to hear too. And thank you very much to the Center for Puppetry Arts and Sara Burmenko, who allows this all to happen. Everyone give her a huge thing. Karen Smith, go.
Yeah, if people have missed part of this or haven't been able to hear it, could you just say how they can access the recording?
As long as the three of you have all given us permission, it will be posted on the UNIMA-USA website in a few days when our wonderful Lori can get it and Donald Devitt can make sure that it's posted right. So go to UNIMA-USA. If you're not a member yet, please join us. Okay, thank you so much. And thank you to Sara.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.